Yes, we saw Putin's long, rambling speech in which he accused the West of starting the war. He accused Russians of being besieged by NATO. He issued false accusations about nuclear weapons and suggested America might be preparing nuclear tests. I think, having said all of that, as someone who was watching that speech closely, it was considerably less dramatic than I thought it might be. There were no announcements about further mobilization. There were no announcements in a triumphalist vein that Russia had conquered the town of Bakhmut in Donetsk, as some people thought might occur. And there was really no new policy change other than an announcement that Russia was suspending its participation in the New START treaty, which is the last remaining nuclear pact between Russia and America. So that's a problem. That's not great. But overall, I think I see in this the sign of a leadership in Russia that is out of ideas, that is conducting these offensives in eastern Ukraine at great cost, with no real hope of a breakthrough, and that is steadily weakening itself for the inevitable Ukrainian counteroffensive that will follow in the coming months.
Yes. Now, the fact that Biden made this surprise visit, did you see it as this very strong signal about the ongoing support for Ukraine, but more importantly, that perhaps Ukraine has the support to perhaps even end this war within the next year or so?
I saw it as a really significant symbolic step, but nothing more than that. I think there is a view in Washington at the moment that Ukraine has a window of opportunity to strike at some point this year, but that if it misses that window, time may not be on Ukraine's side. And I think that view is echoed in parts of Europe as well. The concern is not just over the politics of support for Ukraine and whether that might ebb away. I think it's also a concern over Ukraine's economy, which is in extremely poor shape and requires extensive assistance, constant assistance from the West. So those combination, that sense that you have to strike early, but you can't leave it too late, I think is leading to a sense of this is a moment of maximum opportunity for Ukraine in which it needs a concentrated wave of support. And if it doesn't get that, it may find itself in a worse position and in a deteriorating position in 6 months' time. So the real test of Biden's visit will be which and how many weapons follow.
Indeed. What do you think needs to happen in this window? What action could Ukraine take to take advantage of this opportunity?
Well, paradoxically, I think it's what actions Ukraine shouldn't take. The key for Ukraine is holding back its forces until it is ready to strike. It faces a really difficult situation in Bakhmut. It will probably lose the town of Bakhmut in the coming weeks. It's facing an onslaught on other parts of the front, Vuhledar in the south, all the way up near Kupiansk in the north, which is a rail hub that you may recall from Ukraine's Kharkiv offensive. And the challenge for Ukraine is not throwing its best units into that fight. It's allowing the territorial defense forces, who are not the best forces, to absorb those Russian blows, suffering very heavy casualties themselves, and accepting the political loss, the political damage of perhaps a territorial loss of Bakhmut, but knowing full well that Russia is weakening itself, is suffering severe casualties. And so when Ukraine chooses to attack with its rested, prepared, equipped forces, perhaps in March, perhaps in April, it will be in a much stronger position to do so. So to some degree, patience is the order of the day for Ukraine.
Yeah. Shashank, you know, there's this much expected fresh offensive to coincide with the first year anniversary, which is now a day or so away. Are you expecting this to be significant, or to your point about listening to Putin, do they have the agility to change the approach?
No, I'm not sure they do. First of all, the offensive that they are undertaking right now is not only inflicting casualties, as I've mentioned, it's also chewing up ammunition. And so all the agility in the world doesn't make up for a shortage of shells. And I think what my sources are telling me is that in the spring, Russia is going to be fighting with severely constrained ammunition, particularly artillery ammunition. And in terms of the anniversary, I don't think Russia has many levers left to pull. We could see an aerial barrage of Kiev and other cities, as we have been seeing since October. But here again, Russia does not have the ammunition to keep going. It only has sufficient precision munitions for approximately one big barrage per month. It's fighting with a severely constrained stock of cruise missiles, ballistic missiles. And so while we may see a theatrical aerial assault on February 24th, it doesn't really mean anything. It's not sustained, it's not consistent, and I think Russia is really out of options at this stage. The only question is whether Ukraine can take advantage, because that's not the same thing.
Yeah.
Russia may be weak, but that doesn't mean Ukraine necessarily has the full strength to liberate all of its territory over the next 6 months.
Yeah. And I guess the question remains too, with Russia so depleted, particularly of ammunition and supplies, do you see China heeding the US's warning not to get involved in supporting Russia?
Well, for me, it's difficult to see why Beijing would take the enormous risk of providing military aid to Russia. It's something it has deliberately avoided doing for over a year. And the reason is simple. It knows that it would suffer severe diplomatic blowback. It would jeopardize its relationship with Europe. It would further disrupt its relationship with the United States, which is already suffering because of the shenanigans around the spy balloon over the United States. And it would potentially risk sanctions on parts of the Chinese economy if it were to start doing that. And all of this for what? For keeping Russia in the campaign with no particular theory of victory. So I am skeptical that the Chinese leadership will take the risk of providing military aid.
Yeah. Shashank, always great to get your thoughts and analysis. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.